Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to present to you today. It's going to be a slightly lighter topic than you just heard, but maybe that's a good thing for the last presentation of today. So this is going to be more about how we can move our healthcare system to become more of a health tech ecosystem. But I think it's a very relevant discussion to have today, especially in COVID times. So COVID-19 has caused a health crisis unprecedented in our times, and has put the resilience and agility of European health system to the test. It also has reminded us about the crucial importance of health and well-being for each one of us, but also for the society as a whole and for the health of our economies. And it also has laid bare huge health inequalities around the world. On the positive side, I believe we could be at the start of a new golden age of healthcare, where we'll finally see the disruption of an antiquated system, which may create huge benefits not only for patients, but for all players in the healthcare arena. On March 12, 2020, Emmanuel Macron noted that the cost of free healthcare are not to be seen as costs, but as precious goods, which are essential when fate strikes. This is a very important starting point when thinking about the need for investments in transformation of our health care. To really understand that these are investments in and not cost to our economies. Just reminding ourselves that advances in healthcare have brought tremendous prosperity and growth for the world. Just thinking of the invention of antibiotics. However, in more recent times, we have predominantly been focusing on the cost aspect of healthcare. However, now is the opportunity to take a fresh look at healthcare and to look at health as an engine for future economic growth. The McKinsey Global Institute recently published a report called Prioritizing Health, a Prescription for Prosperity. And in this report, the authors estimate that the economic benefits from health improvements could add up to 12 trillion or 8% to global GDP by 2040. Former Irish Minister of Health, Mary Harney, stresses the importance of the sustainability of healthcare system for our economies and the need to innovate the system based on evidence and data. So data and digital have significant potential to disrupt and transform healthcare, but also to take out the waste in the system and to make the system much more sustainable and efficient in the long run. The European Trade Association Pharmaceutical Industry highlights the opportunity to go even beyond the national system and to look at the opportunity for a fresh start for European health system as a whole, with concerted investments in health data infrastructure and digital health. The COVID crisis has also demonstrated that a pan-European approach to health may be beneficial to address health crisis in a more efficient way, sharing a common platform, for example, to track and trace COVID cases, or to make platforms compatible with each other to capture individual health data in a secure way. Now, the Scanbelt initiative or Scanbelt Health Region is a region which already tried to work across boundaries. This Scanbelt Health Region is a flagship in the EU Baltic Sea region strategy. This flagship promotes cross-sectoral and cross-national projects for innovation in healthcare and life sciences. The Scanbelt Digital Forum brought together health clusters from 15 European countries to join the formulation of a joint declaration on the necessary next steps to create a common European health data space as basis for cross-border innovation and to create an ecosystem of health innovation at scale. And this is a very nice summary of the context, which was given 2 years ago in Sofia by Roberto Viola from the European Commission at the Digital Assembly during the Bulgarian presidency of the Council of the European Union. We are really trying to set a new environment. The new goal for Europe is the data-driven healthcare system. This is a completely different vision from what we were talking about in the past. Data-driven healthcare should not be some state-controlled enterprise, but rather an ecosystem that is open for private entrepreneurs who provide the tools that can create value out of the vast technological and data resources. So what are ecosystems? Business ecosystems are partnerships in which companies interact as equals, aligned by a shared value proposition that offer a superior service that no single company can provide alone, made possible by a dramatic reduction in transaction costs unleashed by digitization. The role of an orchestrator company is really critical to maintain this alignment around the shared value proposition. So if you now look at the top 7 companies in terms of market capitalization, you can see that 6 out of the 7 most valuable companies create this value actually by being an orchestrator of some type of ecosystem. So you may take Apple as a good example for this. And we can see how Apple continues to venture into new business fields through partnerships. Most recently, they moved towards financial services with Apple Card, partnering with Goldman Sachs. Or they also launching now Apple Fitness Plus app, which is the first venture for Apple to move into the fitness sector based on the Apple Watch offering. As part of this venture, Apple is now collaborating with gym chains to bring Apple Watch technologies to its members. So what you can see here is that the very important role of an orchestrator company who brings those partners together and creates an ecosystem of value-added services. Now let's have a look at the startup scene. So from the Startup Health's 2020 mid-year funding report, you can see a very robust and very diversified health innovation market. You can see that on the left. So a lot of different areas where investments are going. And on the right side, you can see that the funding actually increased over time. So the initial fear in the beginning of this year was that the Corona time would actually dry up those funding, but the inverse actually happened. That the first part of this year was actually the most funded on record, which is not surprising given the lot of the health services actually went online. Just one example is Doxy, which is a telemedicine platform. They were averaging 100 signups per day in March, and it went up to 50,000 signups by May, so which is quite impressive. So we're seeing in this example that as well, the speed of healthcare disruption is really accelerating. And to say it with the words of 2 startup healthcare co-founders, it has been said that there are decades where nothing happens. And then there are weeks when decades happen. And that's exactly the situation we are in now. The COVID crisis has forever reset our imagination of what is possible, as we are seeing things happen now within a couple of weeks, which before we hardly thought possible at all. Another good news is that the funding is actually not specifically focused on technologies which support COVID-related business like telehealth, but also covers a very broad spectrum, which will be relevant also after COVID, indicating that investors really see health tech as an area for future growth. So this is an interesting fact. Out of 46 healthcare unicorns, which are companies of a valuation of more than $1 billion, private companies, only 3 are from the EU. About half of them are from the US, 10-ish are from China, and then a couple from UK, which I don't consider EU in its context. So this really begs the question, so what's missing? How do we stimulate more entrepreneurship and innovation in the EU? As Novartis, our mission is to reimagine medicine, to tackle the most difficult healthcare challenges through digital and data. And to do so, we aim at being a preferred partner of the health tech ecosystem. So we have created a network of innovation hubs, which we call Biome. Biome wants to empower and engender health tech companies and people passionate about disrupting healthcare through the use of data and digital technologies. It's also a commitment from our side to foster open innovation, collaboration, and external partnerships. To quote our CEO, Vas Narasimhan, he says, passionate startups and entrepreneurs are the vanguard of health tech. We want to work together to translate that innovation into real solutions for patients. As you can see here, the Biome Network is a global network. We started in San Francisco with our first hub, but we have now already expanded throughout the world. What's really great is that we see very strong progress on engagement, for example, through Biome activities like hackathons or pitches. And we have been building a wide network of partners, but also having some real impact with real projects. The advantage of Biome is that it connects the health tech ecosystem with Novartis. And it enables collaboration on real world challenges and can create effective partnerships through an established selection and onboarding process of new partners. Biome is the link between Novartis and the health tech industry. Biome speaks the language of the corporate world of Novartis, but also speaks the language of the entrepreneurs and the health tech ecosystem. And that's the way we can foster the collaboration. In this situation, Novartis acts as an orchestrator, as Apple has been an orchestrator for the ecosystem along the pharma value chain. So I can give you a few examples. A business challenge for us in pharma is to make clinical trials more accessible to patients. To tackle this challenge, we may actually work with a company which has some way to reach out to patients and to make them aware of our ongoing clinical trials and facilitate that they can be evaluated as candidates for our trials. Another option is to offer home monitoring services. A big barrier for patients in clinical trials is that the clinical trials often happen in big centers in major cities, but the patients are not necessarily there. They may be kind of more in suburban areas. So how can we make create access for those patients to clinical trials while not having them needing to move all the time to the big cities? And remote monitoring could be one of those solutions to make that happen. Or there are certain disease areas we are, of course, working in when we could partner with companies who are providing tools to support patient adherence or side effect management. Now, what we want to do in the Central Eastern European cluster, we decided on a pilot project to go even further and to support Junior Achievement's Preaccelerated Program, which is called Beyond in the field of healthcare. So the idea here really is to establish regional pre-accelerator hubs in Central Eastern Europe, leveraging the experience from our first successful experiment in Bulgaria and building on Junior Achievement's broad network of experience with entrepreneurial education and startup creation. So this collaboration is basically facilitating the buildup of ecosystem from the ground up. And this is something which has been very successful in Bulgaria, where the Digital Health Innovation Cluster was built in a similar way. And it has already created a lot of value for the local health system. The first step in this Preaccelerated program is the mapping of the local health tech ecosystem and the engagement and connection of people with an entrepreneurial mindset, including academia, and to identify ideas that could potentially be turned into startups. And as you can see here, this approach supports basically the grassroots creation and growth of health tech ecosystem by enabling startup creation through identifying early ideas and shaping business plans as building blocks to become startups, and then connecting these ideas and potential startups to the existing ecosystem, which can create a virtuous cycle of open innovation and ecosystem growth. We are in the early days of this project, but we are very much looking forward how this experiment can potentially further accelerate and shape healthcare disruption in the Central Eastern European region. So from my perspective, I'm extremely excited to be working in healthcare in this moment. I think this is a unique moment in time where the tremendous value of healthcare for our societies has become evident, as has the need for a fundamental shift to new ways of delivering healthcare more equitably, more sustainably, more efficiently, and at a higher quality for all. As Novartis, we are ready to help tackle this unique challenge together with you. So I'm now very curious to hear what your thoughts are and any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. It's really very exciting, the network you're building together with various stakeholders. Do you have any particular partnership with the patients? You mentioned something very important we discussed earlier today, direct to patients delivery during amid COVID, and I think we agreed on the fact that this is here to stay, and it will not be away after the pandemic. And we had a very, very, very exciting discussion between the head of CAM at the European Medicine Agency. This is the regulatory body in charge of ATMPs, and the patient who was a patient in a clinical trial with ATMP. It was very touching, very very emotional. So within the network you're building in, how do you see the proactive? We discussed, it's been a long day. We discussed a lot about the PRO's claims in new products, quality of data, real world data. Data still doesn't mean evidence. So a real mixture of important topics. So how do you see that the role of patient today with all these technologies, with all these supercomputers, with all this artificial intelligence? I mean, do you re-challenge this role? I mean, not in the passive way, not just voice to be heard, but just messages to be taken on board and followed.
Yeah, so I think the patient is going to be increasingly becoming being at the center, actually, versus just a receiver. So I think technology is going to empower the patients. Clearly, I mean, they're already much more empowered than in the past. But in the future, I see the future is going to be an era in health for the patients. The patients will own their own data. Will have maybe you will have a chatbot or an AI tool available at your fingertips, which can tell you, looking at all the information out there and the data, this is the therapy they recommend, and then you can talk about this to your physician. So I think the patient empowerment is unstoppable, and technology will just further accelerate this. So I think technology is an important tool, and also for us as pharma companies, we are also on that same way. I mean, clearly you mentioned already real world evidence is critical for us to get these type of data to really know what happens in real time. And I just mentioned this example, how we recruiting patients in our clinical trials, how we making patients access to clinical trials, how do we design clinical trials which meet the needs also from a patient perspective, not just from a pharmaceutical perspective. Clearly we're not there. Clearly, we are not there yet, but I think we understood. Where we need to go, and we have the objective to get there. But it's a step-by-step learning process, because sometimes also the learning is also part of the patient to understand their roles and how they can shape it. There's the two parts. Patients need to also be educated about how they can be part of the process and how they can contribute to making healthcare better. But I see a lot of potential, and everything is going to be centered around the patient. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. I mean, I would like also to congratulate the message you gave in the beginning. I mean, which, if I may rephrase, it's high time, and COVID showed that it's high time for everybody to understand that health is an asset. So, as you mentioned, there may not be sustainable economy if we don't have a proper healthcare system and if people are not really healthy. So at the end of the day, to whom this economy will serve? There will be no consumers.
So I think to comment on that, I think even you could compare it now. Nearly healthcare becomes more like defense for a country. It's as important as defense, and then now we have seen in COVID time, it is really nearly in effect defense. And if you look at, especially in this region, most countries are struggling with an aging population, young people leaving. So there is less workforce around. And this is an asset. So to keeping people healthy so that they can work longer than before, but in a healthy way, it's in the interest of everyone. So I think it's just not yet understood. But I think COVID really has awakened the politicians, to that fact, that healthcare cannot be ignored. It's messy, yes. It's complicated, yes. We know that, but it needs to be tackled. And now it's a moment to start, and now it's a moment to push to bring up the change. Yeah.